Okay, so thank you for coming again. We have Michele, who is an exercise physiologist, who will talk to you about the 5 fitness fallacies. And take it away, Michele.
Thank you so much for being here. Yes, I changed the title of 5 Fitness Fallacies because the 5 Fallacies of Fitness made it sound like there were only 5. But I'm focusing on basically the most important ones that I feel are important to address today. Also, I adapted this for our audience today. This is the presentation that I give to the general public, but I wanted to bring this to the high school because I feel like this is a great conversation to have, being that you're interested in science and pursuing either medicine, sports, physical therapy. It's a conversation that we need to change, that we're having. So what I mean by the commercialization of the body is how it's portrayed in mainstream fitness. There's a lot of money being made off fitness. And I want to point out that there are a lot of wonderful people and groups out there that do give great science and great advice and help many people. But there are still places in magazines and commercials and things like that that are portraying the quick fix and sometimes dangerous aspects of health and fitness. So I just think it's time to change the conversation. And I welcome you to join me in doing that. So let us look here. So who am I and why am I mad? Well, that's an interesting topic. I have been an exercise professional since 1999. I started out as a cardiovascular coach because I thought that the certificate I received for personal training wasn't enough. So I got more education about cardiovascular fitness, and then I became a corrective exercise specialist. What that means is I basically look at people's movement and say, this is weak, this is tight, let's change this, let me help you with that, before you get involved in a rigorous athletic or general exercise program. I got my master's degree in kinesiology 3 years ago, and since then I had some connective tissue and strength training research published. I have a chapter in an upcoming textbook next year where I'll be published with all of the people that I think are rock stars. They research something called fascia, which is a highly specialized connective tissue. And I would like that particular topic to not get commercialized. That's one of my main goals. I'm also work with the University of Texas in Odessa, Midland, as their research coordinator, and I have a proprietary training method, the EDIT method, which is education, direction, instruction, and training, so that my clients can understand really how the body and mind work and get their arms around what a good program should look like without any hype or sizzle, but actual science. And believe it or not, people enjoy the science. I was always told that I better not get too sciencey with people because they won't like it. Well, I think it's an insult to people's intelligence. I make it very fun for people, and because they can apply it to their own body and make some results happen. But what we're seeing now is we're continuing to battle sensationalized headlines. And what I mean by that is this. I will go to conferences and lectures and so forth, and I'll learn all these great things about exercise from a scientific perspective. And mind you, this could be for medicine, athletic training, personal training, physical therapy. These concepts sort of can go with any of those fields of choice. But I would find that I would want to take this information back to the gym or to my clients. And I wasn't finding it in mainstream fitness conversations. And so I just kept getting angrier over the years, like, why isn't this the conversation among people? You know, why is it, I want my biceps toned? Well, that's okay, but I want the conversation to be, hey, my squat pattern has improved. You know, things like that. It's not happening, but I do believe it can. Okay, so our overview of topics. So weight loss lies. And there are, you know, like I said, there's a lot of people out there that are telling great information, but there's a lot of just outright misconceptions about how the body works. The core, we're going to find out what it is and what it is not, and who did the research behind it, because he deserves all the credit. Muscle function, what it means, and definitely some things in mainstream fitness that are not getting talked about. Cardiovascular workouts. What is all the rage and is it safe, and how we can sort of take a step back and explain to the general public and our athletes and everybody what best practices might be. And then of course there's the stretching debate. And as we learn about this connective tissue I spoke of, fascia, we're slowly closing in on the gap between certain debates on certain things. So here we go with the real stuff here. We're going to look at a few magazine covers I took a picture of in the grocery store last year and this year. Drop 28 pounds in 21 days. Speed heal your thyroid. Lose 38 pounds by Christmas. Mind you, this issue was published or hit the stands mid-November. Okay, so we're talking about 38 pounds in 6 weeks. Then we have another one here, more weight loss. And what I wanted to emphasize is especially pounds. And this is an assignment I got from my own professor at University of Texas, was pounds of what? Most people that are overweight or want to get in shape would like to lose fat mass. Well, if you have rapid weight loss like this, think about this context. A boxer, a prized fighter, they do something called making weight, okay? I don't know what they do. I guess they go in a sweat thing and they sweat it out. They're getting dehydrated to make weight. Well, people lose 1 pound a day or more. Basically, when you cut out calories or do whatever, most of the glycogen stores are in the liver and muscle. But if you lose 1 gram of glycogen, 3 water molecules or 3 grams of water are attached to that glycogen, and out goes the water. And there's so many dangers of this to your heart. Think about all the things that are shrinking. Your muscle tissue is shrinking, and I'll explain why that is dangerous when we get to the muscle physiology section. But this is a no-go for me. And I've written to these magazines and they don't care. They just say they have doctors saying that it's all good. And I read the articles, and there's some of it that's good in the articles, but the claims on the front page are just, we're over it, everybody. Carol lost a pound the first day eating bread and ice cream. Okay, I'm not against giving yourself a treat, but when you're trying to help somebody in their journey of weight loss, this is not something you want to brag about that they should be doing. First of all, inflammation happens when we have too much sugar in our system, and that causes a whole other problem for health. So this isn't something I would say to a client. But remember, these are headlines that sell, right? And I'm not against people making money. That's fabulous. But let's do it in a dignified way. Okay, it's time to start telling the truth and not think that people are mindless people out there buying these things. You'd be surprised how fast weight melts off when you do these few small things. And again, with the 20 pounds in 20 days. And here is my favorite. This simple exercise will shrink your waistline, tighten your abs, strengthen your lower back, improve your posture, and help you lose pounds of fat. Okay, if that was true, the whole entire world would be fit as a fiddle and so forth. So I would just like to think that this headline is just there for fun. I don't think it is. I think people really mean this, the people that write it. But I can't really say for sure. It's just not right. So I need to move, before I move on, I have to move my screen item before I continue here, because it's blocking me. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Well, okay. Okay, so more weight loss lies. And there's another one. Again, here's one that says takes no exercise at all. Okay. Okay. Let me explain why this is so terrible. Because while I understand that's interesting, you don't have to exercise at all. The problem with that is that you're not moving your joints and muscles and your heart it's not a healthy way to go, period. And I'm not saying, we'll get to the cardiovascular section and weight section and everything, but there's another one down here, a 2-minute exercise that shrinks your belly overnight. You see my point, everybody. I hope you see my point. This is real deal. These are ads that I received in the last, say, 3 to 6 months. So it's definitely still happening. So here are some solutions. Here's the big secret. Okay, here's the big secret. There is it's called a triglyceride, and it's the predominant fat in the human body. And guess what? It is used as a fuel source. That's it. Working muscle burns fat. Okay, I just attended another lecture of another exercise physiologist who's the PhD coordinator at the University of New Mexico, Albuquerque, who's my personal colleague and friend. Muscle burns, working muscle burns fat. And we'll get to that in a second. But here's the cool thing, everybody. Watch this spinning picture. There's red muscle tissue. And these green, interesting things are called mitochondria. They're the powerhouse. And if you're into chemistry, what I'm circling with the mouse is the triglyceride, the most fat in the body, okay? And we're talking about that. Yields, it goes into these green looking things, basically, in a working muscle, and you get this. Carbon dioxide, breathing out, water, and energy. So basically you're breathing out fat. So if you hear things, and I don't mean to be silly, but I do hear things like, oh, you urinate out fat, or I can roll my fat away with some tool. No. You cannot do that. There's other methods medically that people do, but I'm not going to get into that right now. I'm talking about real chemistry. What can you do? Here's the big secret, everybody. You have to move, period. You can increase lean muscle mass, which is the cool thing is you can actually, these green items, I just love this picture because it's so very simple to see. They can increase in size and they can increase in number. Guess what that means to the athletes? You have more strength, you have more power. You have the potential to make things out of nowhere in your body by putting in some effort. It can also happen with cardiovascular. You do have a nutritional component as well. I'm not going to get into that now, but I will say something about hydration, that pure water is hydration. So coffee, tea, and juice. If you were on a desert island and you only had apple juice for a day, well, okay, of course you're going to drink that. But the thing about anything other than water is your body has to send enzymes to digest it all. And guess what? Every single body process requires water. That's the truth. So I have clients that say, well, I drank good tea and I did this. I like, I think it's great. You drank green tea for the antioxidants, but just to understand that your body has to process it. So are there any questions right now about this particular section? Because we're really talking about how fat is burned, basically.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to let you know that I attended the University of New Mexico. That's where I got my bachelor's degree.
Oh, do you know Dr. Len Kravitz?
It sounds familiar. It sounds.
Man,
is it Lenny Kravitz? No, it's not Lenny Kravitz.
Yes, yes, Dr. Len Kravitz.
But one of my questions is, well, you know, when I used to play basketball at the University of Mexico, and when I stopped playing, I got up to like 185 pounds, and I got down to like 145 now. But the way I did that was probably a little bit unhealthy. Was like I used to fast at certain points and things like that. But just recently in a commercial, in a Jenny Craig commercial, and I never heard this before, But in a Jenny Craig commercial, she mentions that, you get the plates and everything, the food, but it also mentions intermittent fasting. Do you know any research or what's your feeling on like intermittent fasting?
This is what there's a woman named Dr. Rhonda Patrick. You might check out her podcast. Anybody online, she's fabulous. Intermittent fasting, the way she explains it, is time restricted eating. So what that means is you start at a certain time of day and you end at a certain time of day. What does that mean? It means that you start at, the window is about 9 to 11 hours. So if I started eating at 8, I need to stop by 6 for best results. What does that mean? Well, what happens is the process for breaking down food and the insulin reaction, it needs a break. It needs a break. So while we say eat every 3 to 4 hours to maintain blood sugar, I'm still holding that as true, but I'm understanding intermittent fasting as time restricted eating. If you're talking about intermittent fasting as a break in the actual day, I don't know about that, but I do know about time restricted eating, and I'm going to say it works. No more late night cereal eating, but it has to do with letting the body's mechanism for the insulin resistance thing to take a break. Anyway, she's a great resource. She's long podcasts. I have to take a break when I listen to her.
Yes.
Any other? Yeah.
So is Rhonda Patrick is her name?
Dr. Rhonda Patrick.
Dr. Rhonda Patrick. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
PhD. She's very good. So let us take a peek. Let's see, I have to use this part to go on. Now I'm not being silly here either, but at the bottom of the screen, you'll see we're moving on to the next fallacy, by the way. We're gonna see a slogan that many companies use to explain what they think they know about the core. Well, here's the thing. Their version of the core is the rectus abdominis, and maybe some of the muscles where my mouse is. This is the obliques are somewhere in here. This is not the actual oblique, but it's under this sheath, okay? But the thing is this slogan refers to superficial muscles that have a look, which we're going to find out in a minute is disregarding the research that my personal colleague has done. So let me explain about the rectus abdominis. It does 2 movements: spinal flexion, which is she's coming up in this flexing motion. Now, I didn't put extension, but I'll explain in a minute. Extension is going back down the other way. But as far as force producing is concerned, like when we curl our arm, we're producing force with the bicep. It's concentric contraction. So this concentric contraction or force producing, these muscles I'm showing you here only do that motion. They participate in a few other things, stabilization wise and so forth, but they're not a part of the true core, which I'm going to get to now. So the core basically is comprised of several things, and the rectus abdominis is more superficial, so it sits closer to the skin. But what we're going to see, the research that was done in 1999 talks about the inner unit or the inner core. Basically is these 4 components: the diaphragm for breathing, the multifidus, which is a local set of muscles. And if you continue your studies in this field, everybody, you'll learn what local and global means. Local is having to do with just that part of the spine. The transverse abdominis is super important, a nice muscle that wraps from the front all the way back to the spine via a nice big piece of connective tissue, and the pelvic floor. So you've got 4 areas of the body that make the inner unit. But what's also cool is you have the outer unit. Nobody ever talks about this. I don't know why, but they should. That's what my mission on earth is to bring these concepts to the general public, because they should know. Because remember this, everybody. You know, you've heard that saying, mind-body connection. Well, how can you connect to the body with your mind if you don't even know what you have? Makes sense. I don't know what I have in my body. I just hear these things. So this is the outer unit. So basically there's 4 subsystems, and I only show one, the posterior oblique system. What does that mean? It means that these muscles in the back side of the body help produce coordinated movement, sometimes stabilization, but it was mapped out by a lot of researchers that these muscles are a nice family that help soccer kicking better, and baseball throwing, and swimming, and carrying a heavy box and lifting it to the top shelf. Muscles work in coordination, but guess what? This inner unit here has to fire first before the coordinated movement of the outer unit can be productive. But commercial fitness, and mind you, there are a lot of fitness people out there and products and services that do talk about this inner unit. But everybody, it doesn't make a big enough of a dent in our society to put it first. This is why I'm coming up with this. So when we talk about the core revolution, I'm talking about a change of conversation. So those inner unit muscles have to fire first, or be in shape, or be conditioned first before you do any of the major movements. So the research was about the core was really picked apart for strategic marketing gain. You can see how I feel about that. Anyway, I'm pictured here with Dr. Paul Hodges, who is the rock star. And basically, this is what he found. Okay, in 1999, he's one of the most researched back pain specialists on the planet as it pertains to the core, not anything else. He found in those 4 muscles, he had people come into his laboratory that had back pain, non-specific back pain, meaning they didn't have a pulled muscle, they didn't have a slipped disc. It was just, we don't know why they have back pain. He found that when they put electrodes on people's bodies, and when the person moved their arm, they found that that inner unit I just showed you fired after the arm movement. Okay, so really important takeaway. We're talking about the core. That core has to be conditioned in a particular way. And it got distorted with companies and people saying, oh, back pain, oh, let's work the core, with no consideration for the study that was done. They didn't care about the timing of the inner unit. They didn't care about what exercises should be done. Again, some people did. And there are a lot of agencies out there that certify personal trainers, and believe me, they're on it. They're teaching personal trainers all of this. But again, the conversation is not there because there's not enough of those particular trainers out in the world doing this. So this is how some of the research got skewed. And I think it's time to step away from the fancy sizzle and sass of ab crunches. In fact, they found that ab crunch classes and blasting classes, that people that did not have this inner unit in condition had lots of injuries. So that's the scoop on that. Okay, muscle time. A muscle can contract and relax. It will move the joint it crosses, and it works best in the direction of the fiber. That's what they do. There's subcategories of each of these 3, but for today, this is what we're going to look at. So contract, relax. So if you make a bicep curl, I'm contracting, I'm relaxing. It is moving my elbow joint, and it is working the fiber direction. So if you look at this picture, this is the calf muscles. There's different fiber directions. So that's what fiber direction means. Okay, this is one of my favorite slides. Lift, tone, and sculpt. Muscles don't do these words. In exercise physiology, we don't use these words. The exception is tone. We do talk about muscle tone, but it has to do with input from the nervous system. It's a completely different thing. In commercial fitness, it's how toned do I look? And while I think these words can be motivational to people, I think it's fine that they use these words, lift your muscles, sculpt your muscles, and tone your muscles. I'm not against people motivating people with commercial words, but I think it's really important for you students to understand that these words are not used among exercise physiologists in this way, okay? Especially the word sculpting. You'll learn that every muscle has an origin and an insertion. So where it begins and where it ends up. You can't change that unless you have some kind of surgery. I wouldn't recommend that. And sculpting, people can lose fat inside of the muscle, but then you get what you get, the shape of it. Look at people that people have worked out. Everybody has a different bicep shape. Everybody has a different tricep shape. It's very unique. So these are not words that we use among professionals. Other ways that muscles can be a little bit misrepresented. I'm going to use one example that I feel, again, the general public should know about, and I talk about this with my clients. We have to talk about the opposite muscle group too, okay? Not just the muscle we want to affect. So here's the hip flexor complex. If these muscles are tight, the opposite glute will not fire. So the glutes won't be lifted. And again, I'm going to use that commercial word because remember, that's in commercials, that's what sells. Your glutes won't be lifted, which is a common goal. So we're not talking about that. We're saying that here's a great example of what this hip complex does. It does this movement. Well, guess what? If this is tight, it's receiving a lot of the signal from the nervous system. This exercise down here will not help the result of this glute muscle. So you can see in this video of this woman doing this kick up exercise or hip extension exercise, her low back is really great. She has nothing moving because her hip flexor, this muscle here, is probably in good condition. If her hip flexor is tight, her low back would be making a very big curve. And guess what, everybody? She'd be working her low back and not her glute maximus, okay? But we're not talking about this in mainstream fitness. It's just, hey, get this, get that. And again, that's okay. But again, the conversation needs to change because I do think that people deserve to know how the body truly works. And
so I have a question, Michele. So I think I understand what you're saying is that they're saying that if you do a certain exercise, that means you're going to tone or sculpt, like if you do the hip extension right here, you're going to tone and sculpt your glute. But if certain other aspects aren't taken care of, then that's not going to happen.
It could happen partially because we can never really say, you know what I mean? But it's not optimal. And somebody could get a more toned glute, but at the expense of a sore lower back. And this goes on all over the body, pretty much.
I wanted to ask you quickly about just the previous unit you talked about, the inner unit. What would be an example of an exercise that would work that inner unit?
I'll give you my #1 exercise in the whole planet.
Okay.
And this is an exercise that I would give anybody walking through my door, even LeBron James, my husband's favorite athlete. Okay. And I can send a picture of this to you so you can share with your students because I think you should. It's a great one. It's super simple and it comes from physical therapy. Remember, the spine has everything to do with it. So I want to look at somebody, can they control their spine in the most stable environment, which is laying down. So you lay on your back, palms are by your side. It's called a leg lower. You bring your knees over your hips and your knees are bent at 90. If the knees are over the belly button, that's a no-no, unless someone has a really terrible back. Essentially, there's a small space in the lumbar spine that needs to stay. So as you lower one heel down and back up, nothing in that lower spine can change. And I train junior athletes that are on the crew team. And I'm telling you, a lot of these 14 and 15-year-olds, they're shaking and sweating doing this because the spine is not strong. It's a great exercise, but and then the progressions from there are, you know, 2 legs, 1 leg straight, 2, and so I could send that to you as well. But it's an example of the timing, and then you go from there. So that I want to make it really clear. I'm glad you brought this up though, or asked that question. I don't have anything against ab crunches or oblique rotation. I don't have any problem with it. I do those, but my inner unit is in super good shape. And I know because I don't have back pain. But the point is, I'm not against, there's no good or bad exercise. That's not true. It's what's appropriate for somebody, period. You know, that's a good one. But yes, there's progressions from there. Any other questions about that? Okay. So what you can do, this is a great photo of a muscle cross-sectional area. We talked about, well, toning. Like I said, it plumps the skin. That's why the fitness community said it looks lifted, toned, and sculpted. But what's neat is when you add those green dots to your muscle cells, remember the mitochondria, and they're building and building, you can actually build muscle mass. You can see the measurement here is small, the measurement here is bigger. And you can get this by adding. Inside of those muscle fibers we just saw, you can add this contractile unit. This is, I'm not going to get too much into all this, but just understand that these units can keep adding on in succession to build a longer muscle fiber and stronger muscle fiber. So this is how muscle works. So yes, you do see a more plump or toned look. It does look more sculpted and defined. This is because fat is being lost. This is because you're adding on contractile units. You're adding mass. It's wonderful. And you know, nobody has to start out with 10-pound weights in each arm. People can start out with 2 pounds. It's all about progression, because you have to remember when you're working muscle, it has to do with taking care of your bones and taking care of your connective tissue as well. I'm going to go through this a little quicker because I see we're getting on time, but I want to explain there's different types of cardiovascular training. A lot of people think that they have to go all out, you know, turn red and fall down on the ground for it to count. And by the other token, some people think, oh, well, I can do 10 minutes 3 times a day and achieve my goals. Well, you know, I'm not against people doing any kind of movement. If all you can do is 10 minutes 3 times a day, that's fine. But the thing is, you have to understand the physiology of the body, okay? For example, one type of training you might have heard of is HIIT, high intensity interval training. That's a wonderful way to work out. It releases a lot of the hormones that metabolize fat. But here's the thing, you have to work your way up to that. So for a beginner, I wouldn't put them on a HIIT program, but you can work your way up to that. Another thing is people are bored. I don't really like telling people to watch TV while they're on the treadmill. But you know what? Sometimes that gets them to do a half hour, 5 days a week. You know, it is what it is, but you have to be able to give people things that they're going to adopt to live a healthy lifestyle. Steady state cardio is really the opposite of HIIT. So it just means doing a same intensity training for a designated amount of time. So if we want to get the result of, say, fat burning, it would be more than 15 minutes, preferably 20 to 30. If you want to increase endurance and athleticism, it's onwards to 60 minutes, 3 to 5 times a week. For the general population, I tell them to cut it off at 45 minutes of moderate intensity. And the reason is I have to make sure they save their connective tissue and joints for other things they need to do during the day and other things they might do that week. So it's all about how much stress the body is under per week. So you have to map that out. But again, if I'm training a marathon runner, well, I'm going to give them a completely different program. So that goes along with how many minutes. You know, you have to start where you have to start. I start a lot of people off at 4 times a week, 20 minutes, and then we go from there. I increase the time before the intensity, before I increase the intensity. I'm trying to build an aerobic base. The main takeaway from cardio is you're trying to increase circulation, make sure the heart and lungs are functioning well, and any other goals are going to come after that, and it's going to depend on the person. But you have to start with an aerobic base. A lot of people come to me and they say, well, I want to lose weight, I want to get in shape, but I don't want to run. Okay, well, my statement to them is there's nowhere in the big book of fitness that says you must run. Sorry. I've run 3 marathons and I'm never running another one again. I walk jog now, but I mostly like climbing up big hills. You've seen the mitochondria before. Those are our friends. Fat burning zone. We could talk years about the fat burning zone. That's a commercial thing. Every zone, every heart rate is a fat burning zone, every one. But it's the ratio. So if you did a sprint for 10 seconds, you'd be not burning fat, you'd be burning a different energy source. But what I don't like is on machines in the gym, they show the heart rate as a fat burning zone. But fat burning zone really simply is, well, it's simple and complex, but it has to do more with the oxygen that you uptake. If you've ever heard of the term VO2 max, it means the maximum amount of oxygen your body can consume to do a task. So that's why an aerobic base is so important for people to build over, I'd say, a good 6 to 8 weeks. Okay, that would be walking at a pace in which you could still talk for 40 minutes. From 20 minutes, work up to 40 minutes. Then over time, you increase the intensity. This way, your fat burning zone, or the place that you burn the most fat, is not so strenuous on you, because then people give up and quit. Also, what's interesting that's come out is that if you get yourself to a place where you can work out really intensely, you're not burning a lot of fat during that time, but the afterburn is where you get it. So the fat burning zone, it was a fun little way of saying, hey, do this exercise and you'll be in your zone. It's not that simple, and I invite all of you studying all this. You'll pass that on to your patients and clients when the time comes, but actually you can pass that on right now with students. Okay, because students are super important right now to pass on these great messages to their colleagues or to their friends and their parents and all the adults they know, because we have to dispel all these myths.
So Michele,
yes.
I think you touched on like a point that we may be discussing in class. Where your body, you said, like, if you're training for a marathon, you're going to increase the time or prior to increasing the intensity, but you do that so the body doesn't get used to doing the same workout all the time. I would imagine. And also, you mentioned about boredom, right? I don't like running as well. So, I mean, if your goal is not to run a marathon, but to increase your cardio, then you don't have to stick with one type of exercise. You can do several different type of exercises.
Thank you. Yes, I have that in my notes, and I completely forgot to mention that. If somebody wants to sweep for a half an hour or throw a ball against a wall for a half an hour, you got to do what you got to do until that momentum wants to kick in to inspire you to try something else. Cardio it could be any of that. It just can't be something like walking the dog slowly. Again, I'm not against that. I like people up and moving. That's great. But if it's not at a place where you're really elevating the heart rate, don't expect results then. And that's that. So did I answer your question? Okay. This is the debate. This is the last fallacy. And this I say with a lot of conviction, because this is my area of research, and the fascia chain is a game changer. And again, I'm not knocking different people for what they do. That's fine. I'm just here to tell, I'm just the messenger. Okay, so we were told stretch everything every single time. Well, Well, and now we're saying not to, basically. A lot of the things were said, like stretch right before you work out. We're not saying that anymore. And here's why. Every muscle fiber lives in its own house, okay, called the endomysium. Every single strand of muscle, like we saw in my muscle pictures, lives in there. That's what you're stretching. The muscle fiber goes along for the ride, but this honeycomb thing is what you're stretching. So if you stretch right before a workout or an athletic performance, I mean like 5 minutes before, you're relaxing this and you're telling the nervous system to shut down. They say you can do it up to 30 minutes before, but I'm going to explain why there's other facets to stretching. We want to gain symmetry. Okay, this is the popular hamstring stretch, right? If somebody has one hamstring that's tighter than the other, they shouldn't be stretching them the same or not at all. So let's say on this woman here, this leg can go this high, which is a nice 90-degree angle, which is very optimal. And the other leg down here only goes to 45 degrees. I would say, hey, I don't want you to stretch your right leg at all. I want to gain symmetry in your left leg. I'm only going to be stretching the left. Now, for the sake of people feeling even, some people hate only stretching one leg. They can't stand. I have them sort of stretch the other leg. But the idea is that collagenous tissue that I just showed you is what is actually stretching. So the conversation now needs to be not just stretching everything quickly, or even in yoga, people get overstretched, and guess what happens? If you do the same yoga routine and you're super bendy, those muscles won't produce force because the length tension relationship between those muscles is gone. It's like a rubber band you keep pulling and finally it goes, ugh. Well, that's what happens. So another thing that doesn't really get talked about in mainstream fitness is, what about the bony structures that attach, or where the bony structures that the muscles attach to? Well, here we go. This pelvis here I'm circling has optimal posture. This one has an anterior tilt. So look, these hamstrings are already stretching. So if you keep doing this stretch, you're just making it worse. So my clients come to me, my junior athlete clients come to me, and I find this anterior tilt all the time. And they're stretching like crazy, and they're making this worse. So I have to correct the pelvic tilt, and then I assess what's going on with the muscle function. So the idea is, if you stretch, know why you're stretching. Just like you can train the heart and lungs, just like you can change the body by changing muscle, you are changing the body when you are stretching. And I'm talking about static stretching, okay? Because there's dynamic stretching and contract relax stretching and all this cool stuff you're going to learn in exercise physiology or athletic training. It's amazing. I'm talking about self-stretching statically by holding a pose for 30 to 60 seconds. But you have to know, why am I stretching this direction or this much? Because you need to gain symmetry. So today we talked about fat loss, which is the actual weight you want to lose or somebody wants to lose. There is more to the core, the foundation of core, okay? What it is and how it got a little misconstrued. Muscle has several functional features. It doesn't just get strong, but it talks to other muscles in the body, and that's really important. Aerobic base building is key, and you have to evaluate your patients and clients. When you have your career going, you want to know what is happening with those muscles. And I want to thank you for your time. This is my contact information. I do have a Facebook business page, just posting about a lot of this stuff. I have a more academic page that talks about connective tissue. And I have a podcast I just released. Haven't done all of the episodes yet, but it's getting there. And I just thank you all for your time. And any questions at this time?
And feel free, if you want to take down her email, you can feel free to email Michele on your own too. I'm sure she'd be happy to hear any feedback you have or questions.
Yes, definitely
And
would.
over time a little bit, but thank you all for coming in and staying. Michele, thank you so much for your time, and that was a lot of really good information. I think I might, and please send us that picture. I'm going to email you to remind you about that picture, about that one exercise you're talking about.
Oh yes, yes, yes. That's, I can actually, it's
Yeah.
actual video I can send. I think
Okay,
it'll work if
perfect.
you can forward it, I believe. It was great to be here, and thank you again for this opportunity to share the message. So change the conversation, everybody.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.